Hi, everybody, and welcome to Reading a Scholarly Article. My name is Amanda Bezet. I am a reference and instruction librarian here at NCU, and you are welcome to follow up with me directly if you do have any questions related to this workshop. You can reach me at abezet@ncu.edu. So A for Amanda, BEZET at ncu.edu. I'm certainly happy to assist you. Again, welcome to Reading a Scholarly Article. This workshop will focus on how to effectively read and understand a scholarly research article, as well as how to find definitions of terms that you have found in that research article to better understand the overall topic and meaning of that article. The first thing we are going to do here is start out on the library's homepage and navigate to the research process so we can see which portion of the research process corresponds to today's content. So we do have a section here called Reading a Scientific Article. So I'm going to click there. Here we say scientific, the workshop we say scholarly. We're using those terms interchangeably. And here is our Reading a Scientific Article guide. We do have steps involved, which we will be going over. And then following that, we actually have some subject-specific dictionaries, which may help with finding definitions of terms found in those research articles. On the left-hand side, we also have general dictionaries, which may be helpful. And we'll probably return to this guide throughout the session as well. But the first thing that I'm going to do is start out by actually looking at a scholarly research article. This one happens to be on the subject of embedded librarians in academic libraries, which is related to my own academic interests, my own professional interests. And so we have our article here. The first thing, and actually before we begin discussing the article in general, let's talk about very briefly what the purpose of a scholarly article is. The purpose of a scholarly research article is to disseminate research among professionals and scholars in a particular field. Because of that, scholarly research articles assume a certain level of knowledge with that profession or with that particular topic that is being investigated. Therefore, scholarly research articles often do not provide basic definitions, general overviews of that topic, major milestones or histories of that research topic, identifying major theorists in the field. All of this general information may not necessarily be found in a scholarly research article. So that's where the other part of our workshop comes into play, trying to find some of that background information or definitions associated with those terms and topics. But here we are in an example research article. This one comes from our Taylor and Francis database. And this is called Assessment Analytics and Analysis, Demonstrating the Impact of LMS Embedded Librarians on Student Learning. The first thing that we want to do with this article is skim the entire article. This process should only take you a few minutes. You are not trying to comprehend the entire article at this point, but just get a basic overview. So I definitely recommend starting with the abstract. This is pretty intuitive, and most of you are probably doing this as you're looking through your search results for scholarly research articles. So you're going to want to skim that abstract, or actually read the abstract if you can, and then skim the rest of the article. As you're skimming the rest of the article, keep in mind that you do not have to go in order. In other words, it may be more beneficial from this article, instead of reading it, skimming it from the start to finish, you could maybe jump down to a discussion or conclusion section, and that might give you the general sense of what was discovered in this research article and whether or not it really relates to your own research. So here we have our discussion section. Another important section that may or may not be included in a research article is the future research section. Now, sometimes that may be included in the conclusion, which is also a really good section to read as you're skimming. The future research section may identify gaps in the literature, it may identify limitations of the study, and it may make recommendations for future research, which can certainly help you if you are trying to do a similar study. Following, these sections, maybe the discussion and the conclusion, at that point, maybe you do want to pop back up into the introduction and get more of a context for what's going on. So just the bottom line is read that abstract to get the overview, but then feel free to jump around within that article to skim and get a basic idea or a basic overview of what is going on in this study. Your next step, so that was step 1. Step 2 is to review terminology and vocabulary. Some articles are sort of helpful at that in identifying keywords, as we see here. LMS embedded librarianship, assessment, student learning, rubric, bibliography, analysis, course analytics, Canvas, a specific LMS. So some of these are identified, but you will identify other terms throughout the article that you may not necessarily have full comprehension of, right? So you might say, well, you know what? I'm not even really sure what embedded librarians are. I know because I'm a librarian, but someone outside of the field probably would not know what an embedded librarian is. So these are the things that we want to highlight, record, jot down, put in an Excel spreadsheet, however you want to organize it, or print out the article. If you're a printer, print out the article, highlight, circle, jot down the terms at the top of the article that you need to return to so that you have a better overall understanding of that article. This step is extremely important, and it will also carry through with you as you start to research, because some of these terms will become your keywords that you're using to search for additional literature in the library. Reviewing the terminology and vocabulary is huge. So at this step, we are jotting down the words, and we may want to immediately go seek definitions, or we may want to do that at the end. For the purposes of this workshop, that sort of comes into our second portion. We're going to focus on looking for definitions after we go through this step-by-step process for reading the scholarly article. So step 1, skim the article. Step 2, review terminology and vocabulary. Step 3 is identifying the structure of the article. Most journals use an IMRAD structure, meaning they have an abstract, which is followed by an introduction, a literature review, methods, results, and conclusions. So the literature review may or may not be its own section. It may just be part of the introduction. So with IMRAD, we say introduction, methods, results, and discussion. This is pretty typical. Some journals may have their own set style for how they want their journal articles to be written, but generally they follow that sort of structure. Each of these sections typically contain conventional features, and I'm going to pop back to our Reading a Scientific Article guide for this because we do talk about the individual sections here. Now I'm not going to read this here, but you can see that we give an overview of what the abstract entails, the introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. So you may want to return to this guide and read a little bit more about the sections. But the bottom line is recognizing these conventional features, recognizing the overall structure of the article, helps you to read it more quickly and understand the article a little bit better as well, since you're familiar with the flow and how the article is set up. Now let's take a look specifically at our example article. Not all publishers will do this, but on the left-hand side of the screen, we actually have a breakdown of those sections within the article. So I have the literature review. Well, I have the abstract, the lit review. I don't see an introduction, so that sort of is, I guess, pulled into the lit review. Then we have collaboration and assessment. I'm assuming those are kind of subsections of the lit review. And then instead of a general methods section, it looks like we have both qualitative and quantitative methods. So this was a mixed methods research article. So we have our qualitative and quantitative, followed by best practices, one model for assessment. Then we have our discussion, and then we have our conclusion, and of course, our references. So again, becoming more familiar with how research articles are laid out is going to help you in the long run. This also leads us into our next step. So just to recap, we skim the article, review the terminology, identify the structure of the article, and now we're at the next step, which is read the references section. So you might be thinking, well, why would I read the references section, right? I'm trying to understand this article. Actually, reading the references or works cited may lead you to other useful resources. You might also get a better understanding of the major researchers in the area or trends in that research, or just leads you to another article that might better explain some of the concepts that you've located in this particular article. Reading the references section, we typically think of as just, oh, let me go there and find some more research, right? Which is great. It's a great method for finding more related research, but it's also going to help with your comprehension. So here we have our references section. I can scroll down and take a look at some of the articles, but I want to point out that in this particular publisher, we have a way to link out to those resources in both Taylor and Francis and Google Scholar here. Some other ones, PubMed, Web of Science. So they're providing direct links to those resources. If that's available, great. If it tries to link you and you can't locate the article, please don't hesitate to contact us. But I also want to show you how to find articles that you found in a reference that you've seen in a references list, how to quickly and easily locate them both in the Roadrunner search, and we can also use Google Scholar, a plugin in our browser for that, which we'll take a look at second. So let's focus on Roadrunner first. Let's say these articles are not linking out to the full text from where we are, right? We need to find these articles. So what I want to do is copy the article title. So I'm going to go with this one, number 7, Information Literacy Skills and Embedded Librarianship in an Online Graduate Program. Sounds super interesting. So all I'm going to do is copy that article title. I'm going to copy it, highlight and then copy. And then I'm going to place it into our Roadrunner search box back on the library's homepage. I'm also going to change this keyword dropdown to title. So we have that article title, and we're going to press submit. So we should quickly see our search results and then determine if we're able to access that in the NCU library. So let's give that a moment. And so I have a lot of results. Unfortunately, I have 40 results. However, the first one is our result. To cut down on any sort of additional articles that might come up, you can always put quotation marks around your title. That ensures that it searches for that as an exact phrase with no additional words and no other words in between the words. So let's pop those on just to see if that changes the 40. I would expect we would only get the one result, which is what we got. So sometimes that's a little bit cleaner view, easier to locate that article, especially if it's not at the top. Using the quotes, just like we would with any other phrase search, A title is a phrase, it's just a very long phrase. So we have the article we're interested in. We see that the PDF full text is available. So, I took a minute to talk through this, but really it was a matter of seconds before from the time we popped in that title and pressed search to the time our results loaded. So you can quickly identify and locate that article within the NCU library, and we have the full text there. Now keep in mind, if you ever locate an article that is not in full text and you're interested in it, certainly don't hesitate to place an interlibrary loan request for that material. And just to head back to the library's homepage, you can get information on interlibrary loan under our services drop-down menu. We located our article through Roadrunner search. I'm going to pop back to our Taylor and Francis record for that full text article. And we're in the references. I want to demonstrate another technique that you can use. You can use a Google Scholar button within your browser. It's a plugin that you can install either for Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and Microsoft Edge. So anywhere that you install plugins for your browser, you can search for the Google Scholar plugin. Also, before I demonstrate that, I will mention that within our research process guide, we do have under finding a research topic, we have a guide called Explore Google. When you link out to that, it says Google for School. We have a link within there for Google Scholar. This is all about using Google Scholar, including Install Google Scholar button. The Install Google Scholar button does link you directly to where you can add that plugin or extension for your internet browser. Since I already have it, I'm just heading back to my article. I already have it highlighted, so you can see that there. And I'm going to head up to my button. So it's up here in my particular browser, which I use Firefox. And I'm going to click on that. When I click on that, it searches for that either online, or if I have linked the NCU library to Google Scholar, I'll also have that full text link at NCU. So those are two ways to locate. That was pretty quick, right? But then I have an additional step if I'm locating the full text to click out to it. That Google Scholar button, again, instructions are included in that Google Scholar guide. Please contact us if you have any trouble locating this. Also want to point out here within the Google Scholar guide, you can there are instructions for linking Google Scholar to the NCU library. So definitely check that out. We also have that in the form of an FAQ. That way, if something is available, or that way, if you find a record in Google Scholar, you can link out directly to that in the NCU library. Again, don't hesitate to contact us if you have any trouble syncing that up. Okay, so far, what have we done? We have skimmed the article. We've identified terminology that we need to look up, and we will be doing that shortly. We've identified the structure of the article. We've read the references section. So we've done a lot of work so far, right? The next thing we can do is sort of reflect on what we have read so far and start drawing our own conclusions. Reflection will increase understanding. As you are reading, jot down any questions that come to mind. So I'll pop back to our guide because we identify some of these questions here. Have I taken time to understand the terminology? Not yet in our example, but we are going to do that. You can also think about whether or not you're spending too much time on less important parts of the article. Do I have any reason to question the credibility of this research? Do I need to keep cross-checking things to make sure that it is legit? What specific problems does the research address and why is it important? Is it valuable to me in my own research? What is already known about this topic? Have I read something about this already? How do these results relate to my research interests or to other works which I have read? This is important because this is the beginning of synthesis, right? Sort of comparing and contrasting to related articles to see if they support or kind of contradict one another. That is synthesis. And keep in mind, synthesis is a big part of your literature review. If you need help with that, please head on over to the Academic Success Center. They are experts at helping students synthesize research. They provide group sessions, they provide one-on-one coaching, so please don't hesitate to reach out to them. So now we've done some reflection, right, on what we have read so far in this article, what we have understood, what we need to understand, if it's even relevant for us. All of this reflection is going to serve you well. It's going to help increase your understanding of the article. So these steps you're going to want to do, each time you read an article. Finally, our last step, and you probably wouldn't expect that, but our last step is actually reading the article from start to finish in chronological order, okay? So now we're ready to read the whole thing. We're going to read it a second time to enforce this overall understanding of that article. We already have a lot of understanding because we've skimmed, we've investigated references, we've looked at keywords, we've reflected. So we have a good understanding. Reading it that second time is really going to help you to really comprehend what is going on in that article. And again, you'll start to make connections to other articles that you've read on the topic, which is what? It's synthesis, right? So this is the overall process for understanding, reading and understanding a scientific article or a scholarly article. Now remember, one of those major steps was finding definitions so that we could better understand, or grasping the vocabulary is how we phrase it here, but in other words, understanding keywords that have come about in those articles. That's what we are going to focus on now. We are going to focus on finding definitions of terms using the NCU library, and as well as going outside the NCU library. So going back to our article, we know that it's focused on embedded librarianship. We don't know if they've defined it, or maybe they have not defined it very clearly here in this article. So we want to do some more investigative work on embedded librarians, right? So we're going to start out with looking for ebooks that may relate to our research topic and our terms. So I'm going to return to the library's homepage, and we can start out with our Find an eBook page. Our Find an eBook page is located under Research Resources. When I click on Find an eBook, that is what is going to it's going to bring us to our A to Z databases page, if you're familiar with that from the home page. But A to Z database is just for ebooks. So any of the 30 databases found in this Find an eBook page do contain full text ebooks. Now, where I would like to start is a database called eBook Central, simply because that is our largest ebook database, and it is multidisciplinary. It has both reference books and non-reference books. However, they are all academic in nature. This is only an academic collection. And so here what we can do is just search for embedded librarian. That's what I'm trying to understand more as it relates to my research article. So I'm going to search for that as an exact phrase using those quotation marks. I see my results list here. I have 98 book results that have the phrase embedded librarian. Our relevancy sort is on, which means that in all likelihood, the most relevant books appear at the top of your results list. You also have a way to look at chapter results. So if I click to chapter results, it is going to present the most relevant book chapter to me versus the entire book. if that makes sense. So it's identifying a certain chapter within the book, which could be very relevant. So it's telling me chapter 2 in this book is called Embedded Librarians Evolving and Expanding in Higher Education, which is definitely what we're interested in. So I could definitely click on that chapter. The drawback with the chapter results is you see a lot from the index and table of contents sometimes, or appendix. So it's not necessarily content chapters. What I'm going to do is click back to my book results. So I get back to all of those results. And let's start investigating, starting with this first book, Embedded Librarian, Innovative Strategies for Taking Knowledge Where It's Needed. So I will click on that. It's first going to bring me to a landing page for that book, which tells me all of the information about the book, including how many pages are available for download, printing, and copying. These are stipulations put on by the actual publisher, not by the database or the library. However, while you do have limits for those sorts of things, you never have a limit for reading it online. So you can always just jump directly into reading the book online. Since at this point, I know I'm just looking for general overview and sort of definition of embedded librarian, I'm going to scroll down and take a look at my table of contents here. So I see my part 1, I can click show subsections, and I see chapter 1 is defining embedded librarianship. I can show those subsections, and I see definition of an embedded librarian. So I can click directly to that. Now this was quick and simple. We were able to find that definition here. Within this textbook, or within this book rather, this academic book, but it's not always that easy. So we're going to explore other techniques for locating definitions as well. But this was helpful to us. This helps us understand that overall context, the overall discipline that that research article was referring to. So this is going to be helpful to us. The next database I would like to explore, ebook database, is called Credo Reference. So I'm going to go into Credo Reference right here. Credo Reference is, as it sounds, a reference book database. What does that mean? That means they have encyclopedias, dictionaries, handbooks, other reference manuals, but not necessarily non-reference books. Background information to start your research is how they describe this database. So I know for a fact already that there is nothing on embedded librarianship in Credo Reference. So just for the purposes of today's workshop, I'm going to look for online learning. And I'm going to type that in quotes. Okay. So here we have our results for online learning. I have 161 results. They call them articles. For the most part, they are entries from those reference book databases. So if I want sort of a general definition, that might be this from the Encyclopedia of Educational Philosophy and Theory. It's only 8 words, so that might be my quick definition, versus there are much longer entries as well that you can take a look at. Another thing that you can do is look at related searches. So I looked for online learning. Maybe I then want to pop over to e-learning, since that might be a more widely used term within this database. And I see a lot of more general entries on e-learning. I can go into those to read that. Here's a definition of e-learning right here. So while it relates to embedded librarianship, I just knew there wasn't anything on that in here. A lot of students like the mind map that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. This is a way to sort of connect concepts within your topic. So I have this general concept of e-learning. If I'm then more interested in how it relates to adult education, I can click there, or virtual learning environments. If I click on a term, it's going to move the mind map it's going to move that term to the center and then change our search results here on the left-hand side of the screen. So Credo Reference is always a great database to check as you are trying to locate definitions of terms related to your dissertation research topic. Next, I'm going to go into an ebook database called Sage Knowledge. So I'm going to scroll down on our A to Z ebooks page and choose Sage Knowledge. We have a number of Sage products, but Knowledge is the one we want to go into since this does provide both reference and non-reference books, again, all academic in nature. And so here, I also know there's nothing on embedded librarianship, so I'm just going to try distance education here. And I am using quotes, so I look for that as an exact phrase. And we'll take a look at our results. We do have all of our results kind of here on the right-hand side of the screen, so we can pop into any of those results. So typically it's going to present first a chapter from a larger book, although this is a book here. Sometimes it presents the chapter. So here's a chapter in a chapter which is China's Peking University School for Distance Learning, but it's in this larger book. Same thing here. We have a chapter, Attitudes to Distance Education in China, within this larger book here. So that's why you're seeing the same image over and over again. It's breaking down the chapter results. Now, you can also go on the left-hand side and filter your results by type of material. So if I do not want all content types, I can update that just to include all reference books. So at this point, I don't want the non-reference books. I just want to focus on encyclopedias, dictionaries, handbooks, debates, and major works. And so let's see how that changes our search results. We'll give that a moment to load. Sometimes Sage is a little bit sluggish to load, but it is a very reputable publisher and has a lot of great content. I don't want to wait too long though. Okay, that's okay. We're going to abandon that. Basically, I just wanted to show you how you could, oh, there we go. The Sage Encyclopedia of Online Education seems like a really excellent resource. Encyclopedia of Distributed Learning, Sage Handbook of E-Learning Research. So I think our images are just a little bit slow to load at this point. From distance education to e-learning. So you could pop into any of those to try to see if those concepts are better explained for you or even defined within those books. Now, something to keep in mind as we're looking at any book, so whether it was eBook Central, Credo Reference, Sage Knowledge, or any other ebook database, the dates are going to be significantly older than you would expect for scholarly journal articles. As we're reading scholarly journal articles, we're getting those up to the minute. We get new articles every month as soon as issues are published, right? Whereas books, they may be published every 5 years, 10 years, or they may not ever get a new edition of that book, right? So we would expect to see a lot older dates. In fact, this one is 2004. We would see a lot older dates here. So if you have any sort of assignment stipulation where you can't use an older source, that's something to consider. But if you are a doctoral student working through your dissertation, keep in mind there is a little bit of leeway for that older content, especially if it relates to seminal research, theoretical research. I think that would extend to finding definitions of terms as well. Additionally, there's no limit on date when it comes to your own knowledge and your own learning, right? So you may be consulting some of these resources to better understand a scholarly research article that you've discovered, but you're not necessarily citing them, right? You're just learning from them yourself. Just something to keep in mind. So exploring ebook databases is a great way to find background information on a topic and to better understand a scholarly journal article that doesn't necessarily provide all of that context, right? But sometimes it can be tricky to find definitions. You may need to provide succinct and reputable definitions from a reputable source in your dissertation. What if you don't locate that, just in your own exploration of resources? There are some things that we can do to try to better find definitions of terms. And so I'm going to return to the library's homepage, and we're going to go into our Roadrunner search. So what we're going to do is just try an advanced search. So let's say we are still exploring that concept of embedded librarians, right? So I'm going to look for that as an exact phrase. I'll look for embedded librarian, and I can also look for that in proximity to the word definition. What that means, I'll type it out and then explain it to you. If I look for the term embedded librarian and then I give the command in3, that tells the database that you want to find the word definition within 3 words of embedded librarian. So that means it's not 100% foolproof, but the hope is with this search, you would be finding articles that actually provide a definition of embedded librarian. Now, if you wanted just scholarly results, you would want to pop on that limiter and let's press search. So we have just 14 results where the term definition is found within 3 words of embedded librarian. It may be worth checking out those articles to determine, if in fact they do define that term. Now, we use specifically the word definition, but what if the article says an embedded librarian is defined as? So defined. That would not come up because we are only looking for definition in this particular case. We would want to be able to pull in articles that said define or defined or defines, right? We can do that with a truncated search. So we would truncate the word definition to wherever that word could possibly change. So here it could become an E for define or ES for defines, or it could change to definition there. So we want to put the asterisk there wherever that word would change. What happens here is that should raise our search results from the 14. We're allowing more choices for the database, so that's why our results might come up. So here we have our first result, the sufficiently embedded librarian defining and establishing productive librarian-faculty partnerships. So we know it's defining the partnerships. We don't know if the article necessarily defines embedded librarian. Let's scroll down a bit. And remember, we're not saying this has to appear in the abstract, so you might not see our search terms in the abstract of the articles. Okay, here's using an embedded librarian to develop web-based legal information literacy, embedded and clinical librarianship, implications for embedded practice, embedded reference to embedded librarianship. Let's take a look at one just to see. If we're not immediately seeing in that article where the word defined comes up or definition, we can always search that PDF. So I'm going to say define, and here we see our own definition of embedded reference, and indeed embedded librarianship will develop from our description. So they are actually going to define it themselves, which is interesting. But we can continue scanning that document for define just to see where that is, and if that is something that is going to help us in better understanding what that term is. But it looks like this particular article, they want to define it themselves after their study in their own context in their own university. But using this technique of the define with the N3 can be helpful to finding definitions of terms. We've done it for embedded librarian. You can do that for your own terms that you need to define. That 3, by the way, is a number of our own choosing. So we could choose in 10 and 15 and 20, but the idea here is if embedded librarian is 20 words away from define, probably they're not defining embedded librarian, right? They're defining something else that's closer to the word. So I typically will use 3 here. You can always try a higher number to see if it helps. The next source that we'll use for finding definitions is Google, just plain old Google. And so you might be thinking, I'm a little bit nervous going out to Google, and that's okay. You know, the library is more reliable in terms of providing scholarly research. You have to be more careful when it comes to Google. However, a lot of times when we're investigating definitions of terms, it may be for our own understanding. We may not necessarily be citing resources we found on Google. However, there are ways to find reliable sources as well. So let's just start out by doing a Google search for embedded librarian as an exact phrase, and then I'm also going to type in the word definition, okay? And then we'll press search. So Google being Google, we have thousands of search results. That's okay. There's not a lot we can do to narrow things down in Google. So let's just start scanning our results. So we see that a lot of them are actually coming from other universities and how they might define embedded librarianship. But let's scroll down a little bit. What are embedded librarians? This is from a research guide at Vanderbilt. Embedded librarianship in the research context. This actually does look like a scholarly article from the Association of College and Research Libraries website. I'll continue scrolling down. What is an embedded librarian? Let's click on that one. IGI Global is actually a reputable publisher as well, and we subscribe to some of their content. Some information like a description of the book, or sometimes the abstract may be available open access online. And so here they do provide a succinct definition of what is embedded librarian. And it's coming from this particular book. So that is the source that you would want to cite if you are using this particular definition. Going back to our results screen, however, I want to point out that when we're searching in Google, we are searching for any website, right? Any website that anybody could create and post. That includes all of the .com websites, .org websites, .edu websites, anything. Now, if we wanted to try to narrow our results to sites that may be a little bit more trustworthy, we can do that by limiting our results by domain. And so what we're going to do is go up to our toolbox, our settings, our gear icon in the upper right, and that is going to pull up all your settings. Sort of nestled in the center of this is our advanced search. Not easy to find, but there it is right in the middle of our menu, okay? So we'll click on Advanced Search. This is going to bring us to our Advanced Search screen in Google. And here we do have the ability to limit our search results by site or domain. So that means I can just type in .org or .gov or .edu to get results only from that particular domain. Why would I want to do that? Typically, websites that come from .gov, .edu, sometimes .org as well, because there are professional organizations that use .org. Those can be more reliable. So As an example, I'll just type in .gov here. I already have retained my search terms at the top, and I'm just going to press search. And that's going to give us our search results limited just to .org or .gov websites in this case. And so I'm seeing now a lot of scholarly articles or research reports coming from .gov websites like the National Institute of Health, the National Library of Medicine, etc. So these may be more reliable sources for you. Once you're here on your results, if you're ready to change it to a different domain, you could do that at the top of the screen rather than going back to your advanced search. But remember, your advanced search you can get to from your settings. So here are my results for .org websites. So here's one. How would you define the term embedded librarian? This is coming from, let's see here, I haven't clicked on this yet, so let's see what this is. College and Research Division of the Pennsylvania Library Association's College and Research Division. So this might be some sort of blog post. So, you'll have to use some discretion as to whether or not that's an appropriate source to use in a dissertation to define a term. However, we can say that it is coming from a professional organization. And they have some text out here, so it may be that they're referring back to an actual study, may not be. So just be careful in looking at these. If you find a good definition that maybe shouldn't be cited, use it for your own learning, your own knowledge, right? And continue looking for what might be a relevant, reliable source if you need to cite that in your dissertation. But using the term definition here, we can't do that truncated search where we look for define or defined or defines. We can't do that in Google like we did in the NCU library in the Roadrunner search, but this is a pretty effective way of searching for definitions online. So I hope that this workshop has been helpful to you. We went over the steps for reading and understanding a scholarly research article, as well as how to find definitions both in the library and outside of the library. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with me or anybody in the library team, and we're happy to help. Thanks, everyone.